on the session. So what I'm going to do is after today's session, I will send you a follow-up email which will have the slides from my presentation and links to any resources that I mention, as well as a recording of this session for you as well. So we've got all of that running up, so we'll get started. So just a little bit of information for those of you that may be new to Zoom. If you, depending on what device you're on, if you either move your mouse or tap your screen, you should be able to get access to this toolbar down here at the bottom. This will give you access to doing things like unmuting your microphone or turning your video on and off. We currently have it set so that everybody's on mute. It just makes it a little bit easier for when I'm presenting. However, if at any point you want to ask a question or make a comment, please feel free to unmute your microphone. We also have the chat feature, which is available on that toolbar. So please feel free to use this to ask any questions. I've got my colleague Cameron Smith with us today. He's going to be monitoring that chat for me throughout the session, and I'll make sure that I take a couple of pauses during my presentation to make sure that we've got time to answer questions. So as I said, what we'll do is we'll answer the questions on a first come first served basis. I think we've got a fairly manageable amount of people today, so hopefully we'll be able to get through everybody. We have had some sessions that have had around 100 people, and as you can imagine, it's quite difficult to keep up with all those questions. So if we, for some reason, don't manage to answer your question, we will follow it up with an email. And then also, additionally, if you've got any other questions that you want to ask, you can also do it via email if you've not had a chance to do it during the session. So just to introduce myself, my name is Alice Langley. I am an account manager here for Tobii Dynavox over in the UK. I've been working with Tobii Dynavox for about 3.5 years, and my role here is to support sales within my region. So I cover part of the West Midlands and part of Yorkshire, but my background is also speech and language therapy. So we also kind of provide support with training, anything that kind of needs a bit more of a clinical point of view on that side as well. So I do things like deliver webinars like today, although usually I do it more face-to-face contact. So I go out and travel around to different places and meet different people and provide training depending on different needs, whether it's with individuals or with teams. And today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be having a look at developing communication partner skills. And that is part of a series that we're running at the moment, which is a whole bunch of modules that focus on Snapcall First, our AAC software, but kind of dip in to kind of implementation ideas as well. So yesterday I ran a session on getting started with Snapcall First, which includes looking at setting up a free trial. If anybody's attending today and missed that session, we are running it again on Monday, the 12th of June, I believe. But I will, at the end, be posting some links to when we're running all the other sessions. So today we're going to be focusing specifically on communication partner skills, but then we've got other modules that look at things like customizing and personalizing Snapcall First, how we build and track progress, using behavioural supports, and then looking at some additional tools within Snapcall First as well. So if there's anything that you're interested in kind of around editing, then please feel free to join some of those other modules as well. So I just wanted to kind of get started with having a little bit of a think about why communication partner skills are important. So for some of you, you know, this might be something that you've kind of addressed before, but I just thought it'd be quite a nice foundation for the session. So when we're kind of thinking about typically developing kids, what we tend to do is we kind of provide input of spoken language, and we eventually hope and expect at some point, usually around between 18 months and 2 years, that we will get that output of spoken language from them. So we talk to them while we play, we talk to them while we eat dinner, we talk to them while we're in the car. And the idea is that the more we speak to them, the more likely they are to be able to pick up that skill and develop the understanding that's needed to then provide that spoken language. But often with kids using AAC, we're providing or hoping that they're going to be using tools like Makaton or PECS or symbols or communication apps to communicate. And if we are kind of still just providing that verbal language, it's kind of difficult for us to expect those children to have the input of spoken language and then be able to translate that into aided language or use of AAC as output. So it's kind of the kind of example I tend to think of as I'm trying to teach you French but only ever speak English to you, and maybe provide some little bits of French. The chances of you being able to pick up that language through my input alone is going to be very slim. You either won't be able to pick it up or you'll have to do a lot of work kind of outside of that to be able to pick it up. So the idea is what we want to do is, if we're creating an aided language environment, so an environment that's rich with alternative methods of communication, we're going to have a look at how we can speak the same language as that person using that AAC, so that the input that they're getting is the same as the output that we're expecting. And we call this modelling. So we're going to be modelling the same language that the person using AAC is. So the idea is that we'll still be using spoken language, but we're also going to be modelling that aided language that they're going to be using. So whether it be Makaton, PECS, or using a symbol-based software like Snapcall First, or something more low-tech. So how do we do this? How do we create this aided language environment that we want to provide for our students or our learners? We're going to do this by modelling, and we're going to do this as much as possible in as many different contexts as possible, with as many different people as possible, and as naturalistically as possible. So the idea is, in the same way that we use spoken language, we're going to be using it in lots of different contexts. So whether we're getting them dressed, whether we're around meal times, whether we're in a play or a learning situation. We also want to make sure that as many different people are doing it as possible, so that not only will that provide more exposure for that person that we're trying to teach, but also that they're getting it in as many different contexts as possible. So we know that, especially maybe for some of our learners, that they can learn to do something really well in one context, but maybe kind of struggle to generalize that into another context. So example that I will often give is, you know, if I was delivering therapy to a child and I was seeing them once, maybe twice a week, but I was taking them outside of a session and I was using lots of aided language, and I could see that they were making really good progress in that session, and I could see, yep, they're using their device, and when I'm modelling, and they're really engaging in that. But then when I go and ask about what's happening in the classroom, they say, well, no, they're not really translating that. And it's because I've not provided that aided language within that session as well. So it means that I need to make sure that we're expanding it across lots of different settings. And of course, we want to make it as natural as possible. And for one, it makes it a little bit easier for us so that we're not having to set up certain situations. But again, it means that we're providing as much access as possible to that aided language. So whether I'm modelling using a device, whether I'm modelling using Makaton signs, whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm making sure that I'm doing that as much as possible. Just to kind of support that, this is probably a quote that a lot of you have seen before. I know that it's used quite widely, but I think it provides quite a good kind of basis for understanding why modelling as much as possible is so important. So if we think about an average 18-month-old child, by the time they're that age, they've been exposed to over 4,000 hours of oral language. So over 4,000 hours of parents talking to them, siblings talking to them, carers at school or nursery, grandparents. They've received all of those hours of input, which is all building up to them, hopefully being able to develop some spoken language. But if we think of a child as using a communication system or using any kind of form of AAC, and let's say they receive speech and language therapy sessions twice a week for 20 to 30 minutes, where we're focusing on that AAC. In order for them to reach the same amount of exposure as that 18-month-old, it's going to take them about 84 years of just, if we're just thinking about those kind of isolated sessions. So we need to be able to maximize as much as possible the opportunities so that we're giving them the same exposure as those 18-month-old, because straight away, what's happening is that, you know, they're on the back foot if they're only being exposed to that language sort of as little as that. It's really going to take a long time. So I think that's a really, really good kind of thing for us to think about. That yes, those therapy sessions are really, really important, but we need to think beyond that. We need to involve as many people as possible in as many different situations as possible. So how are we going to look at how we can do this? So today we're going to have a look at being a good communication partner, and I'm going to do that via looking at a top tips, which is available within our Pathways app. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. But everything that I'm going to kind of show today is directly from the app that you guys will be able to access for free. And you can do it through the app, or there's other methods on the website as well. And the idea of all the contents of this app is that it helps us to facilitate growth, both within ourselves, with our users. We can use this to train others. So if I'm going into a school or into a nursery that wants to provide an aided language, I can use all of the tools within this app to provide that support. And the great thing about it is it provides instruction both in text and in video, and it's really easy to share all of these things as well. So as I say, I will go into the details of how to access that a little bit further on. But for now, I'm going to jump in and we're going to have a look at 3 different things. We're going to have a look at modelling, providing a positive communication environment, and looking for success. So what is modelling? And I think this is quite an important one because it's something that we talk about a huge amount in AAC. We talk about modelling all the time. And unless you're kind of immersed in that, sometimes it can be a bit difficult to understand exactly what it is and how we do it. So I thought it'd be quite useful just to kind of outline it on this slide. So modelling is using your learners' AAC system when communicating with them. So this could be either directly modelling on if it's a device that they've got, or it may be using a low-tech backup. So if somebody's using a device, you might have a printed version of that so that you can model along. And yeah, so the idea is that you're using that as you're communicating with them. So how do we do it? So the important bit is we want to be using our voice and the AAC system at the same time. We don't want to be eliminating that spoken language because we want them still to have access to that. Because of course, some of our students, or some of the people that we're working with will hopefully maybe be able to develop at least some verbal communication over time. And so we still want to expose them to that. But at the same time, we're going to be modelling that spoken language on an AAC system. We want to focus on showing them how to do it rather than requiring imitation. And I know certainly sort of earlier on in my career, this was something that I did quite a lot of, was to be that I was kind of show or model and then say, okay, now you press, you find. And I think while that can sometimes be an effective way with some of our learners, what's most effective is rather than kind of putting that pressure on imitation, we want to just show them how to do it. And actually over time, and because we're going to be doing this all the time throughout the day with different people, they're going to be picking that up just as we would do with young children that we're talking to. We don't require, you know, a 6, 7, 8-month-old baby to imitate us when we're talking to them. We just want them to take that in. And that's the same kind of process with this. We want to kind of focus modelling key vocabulary. And I know this can be quite a difficult one. I know that a lot of feedback that I tend to get is people say, well, we're really struggling because we're trying to model every word in the sentence that we're saying, but we don't know the system very well, and that's taking a lot of time. And so what we can actually do is just focus on some of those keywords. We don't need to be modelling every single word, but we may want to just pick out keywords. And we know that with systems like Snap Core First that are using core vocabulary, this can be quite an easy way of doing it. So if I'm saying to a child, you know, you want more biscuits, I might focus just on the word more in that sentence. And as I'm saying it, I'm just going to model the word more as we're doing that. We can also model other things rather than just the vocabulary. We can model things like looking for vocabulary as well. So once we feel that our child or our learner is getting to that point where we want them to, or they're seeking to kind of find and search vocabulary and navigate through their system, as I'm looking for different words, I'm going to be modeling that as well. So I might be, say, modeling the word, I don't know, biscuit. So I might say to them, okay, I'm going to go to all word lists. Now I'm going to go to food and drink, and I'm looking for biscuit. Okay, here it is. And so I'm showing them that I'm going through different menus to find that vocabulary that we're looking for. The other thing that's really, really good as well is modeling mistakes. You know, it's good for our learners to know that we're not expecting them to get things right all of the time, and that modeling mistakes can be good. And so if I do make a mistake and I've gone to the wrong menu, I can go, oh no, I'm looking for food and drink and I've gone into places. I'm not going to be able to find that. Okay, I need to hit my back button and I need to see if I can find that food and drink. And it provides that model for not only kind of taking the pressure off being right all the time, but also showing how you can correct yourself if you do make a mistake. And as we've said a lot, modelling throughout the day, so the more, the better. So trying to do it in lots and lots of situations. Do we have any questions, Cameron, at this point?
No questions in the chat window.
Okay, fantastic. So remember, if you do have questions, feel free just to pop them in there. I'm happy for you to kind of chime in whenever. So we'll move on to providing a positive communication environment. And this again is a really key one. And I think sometimes we, when we kind of, especially at the beginning of a journey, or when we're trying to introduce AAC into a certain setting, we often kind of have quite a lot of focus on the child and what the child's doing. But actually what we probably need to do before that is think about what we're doing, what the environment is like. Are we providing an optimal situation for a learner to be able to actually learn? So we can do this with a couple of different things. So the first one is assuming competence. And again, this will probably be a term that you hear quite a lot if you attend other sessions around AAC or read up. And what we kind of mean by this term is we want to make sure that we're not putting limitations on the children or the learner straight away. And we want to assume that whatever we kind of input, that they can access in a certain way. So an example being is that and often an instinct when introducing something is to just provide a really small amount of vocabulary to begin with. So it might be, if we're looking at a core board, for example, we're just going to introduce 4 core words. And while that might be really appropriate for some children, and certainly from kind of an access point of view for actually being able to see or access those buttons, what we need to think is that if we're only providing 4 words on a system, we're only providing the opportunity to model 4 words. So what we might want to do is think about always being a step or 2 ahead of that child, so that we're always providing them with more opportunity. Because if we only give them those 4 words, they're only ever going to be able to learn those 4 words. So we always want to kind of shoot a little bit higher than we think. And more often than not, our learners really surprise us, because actually they can often cope with a lot more than we kind of initially think. And of course, you can always make adjustments, but the idea is that we always want to kind of shoot a little bit higher and then assume that they can cope with more than we're providing, because then that's going to give them as much opportunity as possible. The next one is looking at focusing on use. We talked a little bit about that in the modelling section. So rather than it being, oh, I can see you're looking for the word biscuit. Okay, find biscuit, look at biscuit, where is it? Click on biscuit, can you find it? Again, in some cases that can work, but what we're providing there is a bit more of a cause and effect kind of situation. If they press a button, they get response. But what we actually want to teach is kind of using our system more organically. And so what might be more useful in those situations is just modelling that word for that child. If we see that they can't find it or that they're looking, it's that kind of pause a little bit and then maybe just model that word for them. And if they repeat it, that's fantastic. But the more times we model it, the more chance it is of them to be able to find that more independently further down the line. The next one is looking at responding to all modes of communication. So we know that especially with our learners that have communication difficulties, is that they actually become pretty good at using different modes of communication. They find lots of different ways to interact with you. So whether it's using non-verbal, pointing, gestures, maybe it might be in the form of Makaton signs, it might be using different vocalizations. Even though we're focusing maybe on using that AAC system, we mustn't forget that they've got these other skills that they've learned and they're effective for them. So if that child does use a Makaton sign or does use a vocalization instead, we want to honor that, because that's a really good mode of communication that they've learned to use and they're using effectively, and we want to respond to that as well. We might go ahead and model whatever word it is on their system that they've used. We want to honor that mode of communication that they've worked so hard to develop. Next one is looking at weighting. So again, we know that with a lot of our learners, it might be that they need processing time. It might be that they're learning to scan through their system to find those words. So it's really important that we give them that time to do that. So whether it's counting to 10 in your head before you expect a response, whether it's kind of cueing into them and their reactions. So for example, with somebody that I know quite well, I can often tell when they're stuck and they need help versus them actually processing and looking for something. So it's kind of cueing into that and looking at their behaviours and knowing when is right to support and when it's actually just time that they need to process. So that kind of cues them nicely to providing that support when needed. So looking at this positive communication environment and looking at these kind of 5 key steps, something that I find quite useful when I'm going into a setting, so it might be a nursery setting or a school setting, and they're wanting to provide modelling and support. And what I often do is, after I've gone through these kind of elements and talked them through it, is I ask them, can you identify anything in here that you think that your environment does really well? And can you identify something that you think your environment needs to work on? Depending on the environment, I get different responses. But then what I'll often do is, they might say, oh, actually, I don't think we assume competence as much as we should. So then I'll say to them, okay, why don't you have that as your focus in the next week? Everything that you do with that child, see if you can focus on assuming competence and see if you can open that up and see what difference that makes. So it can sometimes be a really good way of looking and getting people to focus on what they need to do within their environment. So before I move on to looking for success, do we have any questions, comments around that?
No questions. Just one person really interested.
Okay, fantastic. I'm glad you're finding it useful. So the third bit that I wanted to look at is looking for success. And again, this could be a really important one. I think especially kind of an introductory stage of using AAC, we can often look at this system as being a bit of a miracle and hoping that this is going to open up all sorts of avenues for our children. Sometimes you can see it as a little bit of a black and white kind of, they couldn't communicate now we're giving them a robust system, suddenly they're going to be able to communicate. And actually, we know that that needs a lot of time, and that yes, it can provide a great solution, but we're not necessarily going to see a change overnight. So I think sometimes it's really useful to have a look at what success can look like and break it down into little chunks. So I've given some examples here. So it might be that success might come in the form of increased attention to interaction. So it might be that that learner is spending more time interacting with us. It might be that they're initiating more, whereas they weren't before. It might be that we're seeing a jump in the use of vocabulary. So they might have just been using 2 or 3 core words, but 2 months later, they're using 10, 15 core words. It might be that we're getting longer interactions out of them. It might be that we're seeing that they're using more of the tools in their system. So they're not just using core words, they're going to quick fires, they're going into topics. We might just see more enjoyment. We might just see that they're actually enjoying communicating a lot more and they're communicating with more people. Or it might be that we're seeing independence in communication. So I think these kind of bullet points are really good to kind of consider when we're looking at what kind of success are we looking for here. We know the bigger picture is we want them to become independent in communication, but we know that could be a long road. So let's see if we can break this down and have a look at some of these chunks and see kind of what success we can see through that. Any questions, comments? Is there anything else people may want to add to that section on looking for success?
Not seeing anything in the chat window so far.
Perfect, thank you very much. So I just wanted to briefly look at this slide that will hopefully give you a bit of an idea of some of the resources that we're using and how it all kind of plays in together. So ultimately we're looking at Snap Core First as an AAC system for our user. But obviously we know that communication partner is really important in that. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to have a look at Pathways as a tool to support our communication partners, so whether that's parents, carers, teachers, speech and language therapists, and they're going to use these resources to either learn the technical skills of using the app, so whether it's making changes, changing settings, they're also going to learn partner skills, and then hopefully with those things that they've learned, they're going to implement those with the AAC user, so they're going to implement all the skills that they've learned. And that's going to help our AAC users succeed with communication. And the 3 pillars that we look at for success is looking at engagement, literacy, and growth through Snap Core First. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce you to the Pathways app and how you can access these resources that I've been talking about. So it's a free app that you can download. You can use either on a Windows device, so you can get that through the Microsoft Store, or you can use it on an iPad, so you can get it through the Apple Store. And there's also a channel on our website that uses a slightly different version. It doesn't include everything that's on the app, but it uses some of the key functions in there. So there's 3 different ways that you can access it, either Windows, iOS, or online. The online version, I will show you, I'll demonstrate it, but it takes a little bit more of a linear approach. So it's got some of the same content. It talks about setting up the device and app. It talks about trying those skills and looks at the communication partner skills as well. So I will kind of show you through each of those. Now, a little bit of a wider kind of view on Pathways. It's got a different, obviously it's got the top tips section that I've just talked through. We've also got sections on getting started with Snap Core First. So if you downloaded the app and you want to know how to get started, we look at building learners' skills. So this covers a whole bunch of, it's around 200 lesson plans. We actually cover this in a further module called in Build Skills. We've got a section around Customize Core First, which I'm covering tomorrow at my next webinar. Top tips that we've looked at today, and the goals grid, which we also cover in module 4 around build skills and tracking progress. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to jump in to Pathways and show you what that looks like. Cam, I've seen a couple of messages flash up. Is there anything that I need to answer or cover?
One question was, can you use it with Android?
No, unfortunately, it's only available on the Windows and iOS platform, but you can just access it via the website, which I'll show you, which you could do on an Android device. So once you download the app, which is free, and you open it up, it'll look like this. One thing to note is that it is available in a few different languages. So for those of you that maybe work with children or adults that use different languages, it might be worth checking that out. If I click on this green bar at the bottom, I'm going to get started. Now, I've already been using this, so I've got a couple of profiles set up. But what I'll do when I first start is it'll ask me to add a profile. So I can do that here, give it a name, I can add a photo to it. And once I've done that, I click on that user's name to open up their profile. Now, something to note in Pathways is that there are loads and loads of videos that take you through each step. I'm not going to show you those videos right now because we don't have time. I would highly recommend kind of sitting down and watching some of these videos when you first get used to using Snap Core First. So you'll notice on the left-hand side that we've got all the different sections that we talked about. So I'm just going to focus on top tips for now because that's what we've gone through. So if after today you want to access that, you go down to the top tips section. Again, there'll be a really nice video that will explain. And then there will be the 3 different elements that I've talked about. And they're all kind of laid out the same. So if I click on modelling, again, there'll be a nice video introducing modelling, what modelling is. And then I've got 2 options. I can click on what is modelling. And here it's going to give me some hints about it. And this is basically exactly what I just talked about in the presentation. But what's really nice here is if I click on this cheat sheet button up here, it actually provides all of that information in a really nice printable sheet that just talks about what modelling is, why we do it, and gives you those tips. And a couple of things to notice here with this cheat sheet, and it's the same with any cheat sheets that you'll come across in Pathways, there are a couple of things you can do with it. I can take that and save it straight to my computer, which I actually do quite a lot because I often get parents or carers getting in touch saying, I need a bit more information on modelling, or I want to talk to modelling about grandparents at the weekend. Have you got anything I can share? So I could just attach that to an email and send it straight to them. You could also print it off. Again, I've often got sort of 5 or 6 copies in my bag that I can hand out when I go to different visits. The other thing that I can do down here, and you'll see this throughout Pathways, is that there's this big blue button that says add to my stuff. Now, if I do that and I come out of this, back onto my main page of Pathways, up in the top right hand corner, you can see here there's a My Stuff button. And if I click on there, what that will do is it will basically collate all of the things that I've saved or favorited. So as I'm going through, if I find things that I think are going to be really useful that I want to be able to come back to, I can just save them. And you can see here we've got different sections. So it will collate all the cheat sheets that I've saved, or the videos that I think I want to show again, or the lesson plans, etc. So as I go through, I can collect all the things that I think are most useful. And next time I come into my Pathways app, I can just go onto my stuff and access them that way. So if I just come out of there, so we've looked at what modelling is, and then if I go on to show me examples, here we will provide 3 different videos that show modelling in different situations. And again, I think this is a really, really important one to use, especially when we're trying to demonstrate to other people, because it's really hard to understand what modelling is unless you see it in action. So if I'm able to go into a setting and demonstrate what modelling is, that will work really well. But if I'm in a session where maybe I'm meeting parents or carers separately, it might be really useful for me to actually show them some of these videos. So one thing that we've done in each of the videos is we've shown examples both with children and with adults. So hopefully that provides kind of really good examples regardless of what age you're working with. So if I come out of this modelling, again, I'm going to go to my next section and it's going to provide exactly the same. A video, a section about what is providing a positive communication environment, the cheat sheet, where again, I can add that, I can print it, I can save it. Or again, it's going to show me some examples, and each of these are going to be videos that talk a little bit and show examples of each of those tips that we talked about. Exactly the same for Look for Success, a video. And then with this one, we have got videos for each of the, talk about each of the different tips that we talked about. And again, there's that cheat sheet that's useful for you to print off and use. So that's accessing Pathways within the app. And now I'm just going to quickly show you how you would access that via a web page. So if you maybe don't have access to a Windows device or an iPad where you can get that app, you can access it via our website, which can be used on any web browser. So I will send you a link to this, but you go to our Tobii Dynavox website and then you will go to the section where it says Learn and click on Pathways. And then here it will give me links to the app, but if I scroll down, there's a section for online. And again, it will give me options for different languages. I'm just going to access the English one here. And then this will just provide a kind of online version. So if I click on Start, it gives me a bit of a introduction to how to use it. It goes through a couple of different things. And then when I get to the main menu, here is where I can access different kind of sections. And so if we were looking for the top tip section that we've talked about, it's the Learn Partner Skills section in here. And it will basically take you through exactly what I've just talked through on there. And again, it will provide videos and instruction sheets that are the same as the cheat sheets there. So you can either access it via the app, or you can come to our website. I'll show you that again. It's Tobii Dynavox, click on Learn, Pathways, scroll down to where it says Pathways for Core First Online, and then it will open up into here. And then once you've chosen your language, it will open that up for you. Do we have any questions around that, Cameron?
Sorry, no, we don't have any questions there.
No questions? Perfect. So I realised, despite my promise, I have run over time. So I'm just going to work to close this up right now. So let me just click through that. So just to kind of have a look at the modules. So that covers the developing communication partner skills. I'm really hoping that you found that useful. As I say, please dig into the app and take some time to go through, review those videos, look at the cheat sheets. Please get in touch if you've got any questions about kind of maybe some of your specific settings or your environments. We are going to be delivering all of these modules throughout the rest of June. So this slide that I will be sending out to you as part of the follow-up gives you dates and links to all of the next ones. So tomorrow, I will be delivering the Customize Core First section, which looks at editing Snap Core First, the app. So I would love to see some of you guys there if you found today useful. But as I say, we're running each of these modules twice over June. So maybe if you missed yesterday's session, please feel free to sign up. We're doing it again on Friday the 12th. And again, we'd love you to share this as widely as possible. So if you've attended a couple of these sessions, you think they're really useful, please share it with anybody else that you think would benefit from attending these sessions as well. We're also running a similar set of modules that focus on Boardmaker Online. So this is a symbol-based software that can help you create either print-based resources or interactive-based resources. And again, we've got a full program that will be running through each of those. This can work really well in conjunction with using Snap, because you can learn how to create resources that can supplement. So whether you're making low-tech versions or whether you're looking at curriculum-based resources to kind of support that learner as well. So please feel free to join us in those sessions too. And then finally, just a little note to let you know that if there's anything else that you want to find out about, whether you want to set up another training session that's maybe more specific to a team that you're working with, or some parents that you're working with, or if it's a family, please get in touch with us and we can provide demos on software, hardware. We can look at setting up assessments if that's something that you would be interested in. If you're based in the UK, you can click on this link that will take you to finding your local account manager. We've also got our details for our UK office. But if you are from outside of the UK, this link down here in the bottom left will take you to find your local sales rep wherever you are around the world. So hopefully you should be able to find the support that you need. As I said at the beginning, I'll be sending you a copy of this presentation along with a copy, a recording of this session. So you'll be able to look back on it. I am happy to kind of hang around for 5 minutes or so if anybody's got any more questions. But if not, thank you so much for joining, and I really hope that we see you again at another session.